You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today is the final episode in a series I've been doing this month, all about the top questions that daughters-in-law with toxic in-laws tend to ask themselves. We've covered, why do I feel crazy when I have toxic in-laws? Why can't I forgive? And today's final episode is about, why does peacekeeping always fall on me with toxic in-laws? Are you a Catholic wife who's grappling with challenging in-laws? If so, you've found your sanctuary here. Welcome to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast, a place where we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on, and you finally get the validation you've been seeking. I'm your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife and convert who's weathered nearly 3 decades of in-law drama. But before we dive in, let me just share this quick message. This podcast is my own personal journey and is not an official ministry or apostolate of the Catholic Church or of any diocese. I have no ecclesiastical authority. I am simply one woman with one story, taking it one day at a time, walking alongside you. Hello, welcome back to my podcast. I am Miriam Susan, your host, and today we're going to be talking about what may be one of the biggest burdens that we have as daughters-in-law with toxic in-laws, and that is this role that we assume of being the people who are trying to keep the peace. And why does that always fall on us? Why is it that our toxic in-laws never really do anything to keep the peace? So we're going to be diving into that today. I hope you found this series helpful. And sometimes if it's just a matter of knowing that you're not the only one thinking these things, having these thoughts, feeling like you're the only person in the world dealing with this, which is totally not the case. So that's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to help you feel less alone, but also address some of these questions that are really, really nagging questions that we have, because chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you take your faith very seriously. You take who you believe yourself to be very seriously. And when there's these toxic people that come into the picture and they discredit you and they make you feel like you're crazy, they make you feel like you're unforgiving when you're not, that needs to be addressed. And I want you to feel validated that you aren't being bitter and unforgiving. You aren't being hateful. You're not crazy. So today, let's talk about peacekeeping. And I want to differentiate peacekeeping with peacemaking. So peacekeeping is what we try to do with our toxic in-laws, because we think we can appease them. We think we can say the right things, do the right things, dress the right way, dress our children the right way, that we can do all these things and it will make any difference with the level of peace we have with our in-laws. That's what I see as peacekeeping, where the burden is all on you. The burden is to try to keep them happy when that is an impossible goal to attain. Then there's peacemaking, and that's something that we kind of do internally, where we decide that we are going to make decisions, we're going to set boundaries, we're going to do things that actually create peace for ourselves, for our marriage, and for our families. And so peacekeeping is more like, I'm trying to manage you and your emotions and your chaos, and peacemaking is more of a conscious decision that we are making to find peace within ourselves, within our marriage, within our families, our immediate family, regardless of the chaos that's going on around us. So today, our scripture reference is from the book of Romans, and it is chapter 12, verse 18. And this is from the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic Edition, which says, "If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all." Now, chances are, before you have any kind of gathering, any kind of visit with your in-laws, you've got this mental checklist that you're going through. You're thinking about, what do I need to avoid talking about? If the topic comes up, how do I get out of that conversation? Who you're going to sit next to. If it's a big family dinner, who you don't want to sit next to, who you don't want to put your kids next to at these kinds of events. How to redirect your mother-in-law and your father-in-law before they corner your kids and start peppering them with questions that your kids don't need to be peppered with. And your husband, chances are, maybe he's a little further along on the road. Maybe he really sees what's going on. He's not just like a bystander in all of this. But chances are your husband just walks into these kind of gatherings and just exists. He's relaxed. He's not going through all of these things that you're going through in your head because it's his family, and all of this drama and chaos that comes with seeing them has been normalized for his entire life. And so you end up doing this emotional labor for essentially three people: for yourself, for your husband, and for your in-laws. And then four or more if you're doing it for your kids. And nobody asked you to do this. Nobody asked you to be the peacekeeper, but yet somehow it became your job or your responsibility. Oftentimes when we have brothers and sisters-in-law who want to just keep the peace, they want to keep the status quo, when things start to get disrupted because you are seeing things that are unhealthy, that you're seeing behaviors that you will not accept, then all of a sudden it becomes your fault and your job to try to keep mom and dad happy because nobody else wants to do it. It's so fun. Oh, it's so crazy. It's so crazy. But anyway, because of all of this, you end up being mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and a lot of times physically exhausted because of this load that you're carrying. And you're probably asking, why does this always fall on me? Why is it my responsibility to make sure my mother-in-law doesn't have a breakdown in the middle of Christmas gathering? Why do I have to tiptoe and walk on eggshells around my father-in-law so he doesn't lose it when I haven't served the right kind of stuffing or dressing with turkey dinner at Thanksgiving? And why does it always fall on us? Why is it our responsibility? Well, first of all, it's not. So we're going to talk about why did we get assigned this role? The people who are chosen, or actually who are assigned as the family peacekeeper, we're not really chosen. You just kind of default into it because somebody had to manage the tension. And chances are you are the only one that was willing to do it because it's uncomfortable. You're seeing things you can't unsee. You're hearing things that you can't unhear. And nobody else seems to want to say anything. But you can't do it. You can't be who you are. You can't be your true authentic self and tolerate these kinds of things. So we get to be the peacekeepers. And over time, our willingness to host Christmas when nobody else was going to do it, or when your mother-in-law or father-in-law were like, well, nobody likes to come over here. There's all these, rules that have to happen over here. Why don't you host it? Or just a myriad of 1,000 different scenarios. That sort of becomes an expectation. So you volunteer to do something one time, and then all of a sudden that is the expectation that you are going to do it every time. And that expectation tends to become an invisible requirement. Like now, if you volunteer for going up to see your in-laws once, because maybe they were sick one time and maybe there was an accident, maybe they had a fall, maybe there was a surgery, and so your family decided, to make it easier on mom and dad, we're going to go up to see them for Christmas or Easter or fill in the blank for the holiday. But they loved the attention so much that now it's expected that you're going to go and celebrate Christmas or Easter or whatever at their house. But now you have more kids. Maybe you have 2 little ones under 3, and you have a couple of older ones. Maybe you have a child that's on the spectrum. Maybe you have a child that has other special needs, and it's really hard to get out the door and go visit. But you did it once, so why can't you do it for the rest of your life? That's kind of how it goes with, no regard to how difficult it might be for your family or any other brothers or sisters-in-law who also are in a similar predicament, how difficult it is for you to make that choice to go up. But it is still a choice. It has consequences if you choose a different option, but it is still your choice. So our instinct when we go through all of this is to be charitable. We're trying to be kind and loving and as accommodating as we can to our in-laws, but is it actually working? So we try to be charitable. We try to serve our in-laws. I was always trying to make the dessert that I knew my mother-in-law would like. Try to keep, the harmony there. And all of these things are good. It is good for us to want to be charitable. It is good for us to want to be of service to our in-laws. It is good to want to maintain a level of harmony. But the problem is that then turns into almost an exploitation of us by this family system that was already broken and messed up before you ever said, I do. It was. You didn't create the chaos. I didn't create the chaos. I just became the cleanup crew. You probably are there with me as having been dubbed the cleanup crew to maintain this harmony, to maintain this level of service that your in-laws expect, and to keep the harmony when it's really just fake. So going back to the scripture that says, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Now, a lot of our in-laws will cherry pick that and just say, live peaceably with all, especially if you have pulled back, you have gone limited or no contact, and they will use that. My in-laws have a lot in writing, in voicemails, letters, emails, texts, to try to guilt us into keeping the peace when the scripture says, if it's possible for you, as far as it depends on you. Like I said, this is a scripture that a lot of people like to use, a lot of toxic people like to use to mandate that you make peace happen. Period. End of story. But if it is possible, means that St. Paul is acknowledging that sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it isn't possible to live peaceably with all people, especially people who are not peaceable people, people who are really not desiring peace. That's my whole thing. That's why my website is Desiring Peace, because I have been desiring peace with my in-laws for over 30 years. But that only goes one direction. My in-laws do not desire peace with me. They desire compliance and control. And if somebody is seeking peace and desiring peace and harmony, but the other side is seeking control and manipulation and influence, those two don't meet. They conflict. Where it says, as far as it depends on you, this is where there are parts that don't depend on you. If your in-laws are deceitful, if they are manipulative, if they are super controlling, if they try to make things happen in a really sneaky way, if they're just constantly demanding that you give, and there's really no reason for them not to give a little, that's the part that does not depend on you. You can't force somebody to be at peace with you. All the chaos and stuff in the Middle East is a perfect example. You cannot force another party who's not willing to have peace to make peace. It's not going to work. If somebody always wants to be at war, guess what? They're going to be at war until something happens that's so dramatic that they have to concede. That doesn't often happen with highly toxic people. So you're not responsible for managing your in-laws' emotions. You're not responsible for managing perhaps your husband's conflict avoidance because he doesn't want to stand up to his mom and dad because maybe he did as a child and it did not go over well. And we're not responsible for trying to maintain everybody's comfort all at the same time. That doesn't even logically make sense that everybody can be comfortable all at the same time. Just as a silly example, in our family, there can be 7 of us in the same room, and one person is hot, one person is cold, one person wants the fan on, one person does not. Another person is hungry and wants to have a snack. Another person wants to watch the movie. The other person wants to pause it because they need to go to the bathroom. It's just not possible logically to make sure that everybody's comfortable all at the same time. And yet, as the daughters-in-law in a toxic family system, somehow we think that that's our responsibility. Maybe because we are told, well, things weren't like this until you got married. Maybe you've been told what I was indirectly in court, that the relationship my in-laws had with their son got considerably worse once we got married. Yeah, that's interesting because that was 30 years ago, and we seemed to have a pretty peaceable relationship for over 20 years until we just had enough. We didn't go no contact until we had been married for 23 years. So it's just ridiculous to hear statements like that. And thankfully, we have been removed enough. And it's just not my personality either to take responsibility for other people's feelings that are not mine to hold on to. But I knew right off the bat that was absolutely ridiculous. And chances are that it's absolutely ridiculous for you too if your in-laws are to say something like that. Like, oh, our son, he's changed since he met you. Good. That's good. We are supposed to change and be a different person once that wedding mass is done. We are no longer the dutiful son, the dutiful daughter. We are now husband and wife, and we are different people. And our priorities should shift. Our priorities have to shift in order for us to have a good, solid marriage. So it's interesting to hear toxic people throw out these things. Oh, well, he's changed. Okay, I should not be the same person 20 or 30 years into a marriage that I was at the very beginning. I shouldn't. Hopefully you're not either. Whether you're 2 months into your marriage or 20 years. You should have grown. You should be a different person than you were when you got married. So this statement of, I know I'm going off on a tangent. I'm sorry. This idea that we're supposed to be the exact same people. We're supposed to be held accountable to our parents even after we've been married for 6 months, 10 years, 30 years. That's insane. That's insane. So going back to what I was saying, we're not responsible for managing our in-laws. Their emotions, their feelings, their schedules, none of that. And what real peace is not the lack of tension. That's just like waiting for the ball to drop. It is a presence of truth being handled with love and making decisions that honor the vows that we made when we got married. That's where our peace should be focused. Doing things the way God designed. If we're constantly trying to manage the emotions of people, I'm breaking out my chart again. I'm breaking out my chart of the properly ordered Catholic family. Here it is. When we try and are focused on relationships that are outside of this circle, that are not God, that are not our spouse, that are not our children, that will not bring us peace because it's not how God designed it. Peace is achieved when we focus on God first, and then our spouse, and then our children, and leave all the other relationships in the background where they belong. The problem is our in-laws don't like that if they're toxic. They want to be in a place of importance that is not theirs to claim. And so there is this lack of peace because they keep inserting themselves into positions that are not theirs to be in. And then we have to deal with this disordered circumstance with people asserting a position and trying to stake a claim that is not theirs to claim. So what you've likely been doing when you're trying to keep the peace is not maintaining peace. Otherwise, you probably would not be listening to this podcast. It's a performative peace. It's fake. It can look nice and clean and shiny and pretty on the outside, but inside it's chaos and anger and frustration, annoyance, control, manipulation, all hidden behind this fake facade. Kind of like the whole wolf in sheep's clothing. It might kind of look like a sheep, smell like a sheep, act a little bit like a sheep, but underneath it's a wolf. And that's what we're dealing with. So we're not maintaining actual peace. It's just performative. It's just for show because it's not real. It's not real. Now, you can put down the checklist. You can put down your clipboard. You can put down the note that you have on your phone of all the mental things that you go through before you go and see your in-laws. And just let it go. You might not think that you can. It might be very hard for you because you feel guilty, like you should do everything you can to keep your in-laws happy. And that's something that you will have to work on because it's not your responsibility to make your in-laws happy. Yes, it is wonderful and it is a blessing when we can do things that make our in-laws happy, but that is not our be-all, end-all goal. We should be trying to make God happy. And then we have to seek to make peace with our husbands, live peaceably with them, live peaceably with our children. But you can lay all these expectations of keeping the peace down. I'm not saying that there will not be fallout from doing that. Because if you've been doing this for even just 6 months, toxic people will cling to those patterns that you've already established and then push back and say, well, why are you not doing Easter with us this year? Why did you decide not to have Christmas dinner with us? Why are you pulling back? That's a big one. That's a big one I've heard a lot lately, is toxic people noticing when we decide, we're gonna take a step back or two. We're not going to jump every time you text. We're not going to answer the phone every time you call. We're not going to visit every time that the offer is extended. And they notice, not because they care about, now this is a generalization, this is my opinion, this is not, a fact, but oftentimes they will notice not because they care, but because now maybe some things are falling in their lap that you used to pick up and carry and take care of. And so they're not noticing that that maybe there's something wrong. They're noticing that things that you used to pick up, you being part of the cleanup crew, are not cleaning up anymore. And now they have to deal with it, and they don't like it. So know that you're not alone if people have said, well, we've noticed that you're pulling back. Yeah. Probably something that you and I should have both done from the very beginning. But because we didn't know, because we were naive, because we hoped for the best, we hoped that being married would change things, and it didn't, then we just kind of fell into these patterns, picked up this mantle of being the peacemakers, or peacekeepers rather, in the family. And then when you start stepping away, people will notice. You can step away. You can. Like I said, but there can be fallback. And so you need to be prepared and think about what that fallback would look like. Because it's not because you don't care. It's because, we realize that we weren't meant to carry all of this all alone. It wasn't meant to be our burden to pick up. And us carrying it, us being on this cleanup crew, has not produced any peace. Maybe a facade of peace for your in-laws because you're just doing things to make them feel happy, to be happy, but that's not peace. Peace is not the same as happiness. And remember that happiness is not a fruit of the Spirit. You were not designed. When you said those vows, there was nowhere in there that said, and I promise to be the emotional shock absorber for the family in a system that was broken long before I even came into this system. That's not one of your vows. If it was, something was messed up. Something was really messed up in that mess. But we were not made to be that. We're not the emotional shock absorbers for the family. We're not the cleanup crew. We're not the peacekeepers. We're just a woman who married somebody's son, and they expected you to fall in line and keep them happy with no regard to your own personal desires, your marriage, or your children. And you can let that go. Now, I have not promoted my scripts, my conversation guide for toxic in-laws in a really long time. And so I thought maybe I should do it again. Maybe I should do it because I am seeing more questions about what do I say to my in-laws when they do something like this? How do I address it? Do I even address it? So if you are facing these situations where you feel like your in-laws are trying to trap you and you're not quite sure exactly what to say, not that you have to say exactly what is in this conversation guide, but it helps. It gives you an idea of what to say. Then I encourage you to go to desiringpeace.com/scripts, SCRIPTS, and get your free conversation guide. And it talks about just different things that you can say to kind of diffuse a situation and not give in. Because usually giving in is the only way to diffuse a situation with your in-laws if they're toxic. But this is just a guide. It's a guide to give you things that you can say in these moments when you really just want to say no and walk away, but you feel like you need to kind of deliver it maybe a little more gently. I am a no person. I will just say no and leave it at that, which is very uncomfortable for people who are used to people over-explaining. And if this is you, this is where these scripts are very handy. If you are somebody who, let's say somebody has asked you to volunteer for vacation Bible school at your parish, and you really don't like working with children. Not that you don't like children, but you don't like working with children. And maybe you don't really like working with some of the people at your parish. I mean, that's kind of valid too. And you just want to say no. But chances are, if you are an over-explainer, you might say, well, our family has just a lot going on, and I just don't have a lot of, time to plan out anything. And, the times are a little bit difficult to work with. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because what toxic people hear, they hear the little gaps in there. It's like, oh, no, we've got the lesson plan. I'll plan out. You just have to show up and help. Shoot. Okay. So they got you there. Or if they say something like, oh, well, the times don't really work. Oh, that's all right. Well, my son is going too, and I can just pick your kids up and, we can ride together and do it together and you don't have to drive. They look for those little gaps. And this is where the scripts come in, is that eliminates those gaps. It eliminates the over-explaining. Yes, it'll take some practice, but it makes your response clear if you don't really want to just say no. If it's hard for you to just say no. My husband he is not a no person. He's not. I think that's partly by his temperament and partly by design, by how he was trained as a child. And so we are constantly having discussions about how to get our kids to respond to different things. So it's like, okay, I need, one of our boys to go take care of the chickens. We have chickens. And my husband will say something like, I want you to, at some point today, go out and do such and such for the chickens. That doesn't work for our kids. I think we're a pretty heavy ADHD family, and people with ADHD tend to need very clear instructions and a deadline. And so I'll say, hey, I need you to go do the chicken stuff now before you have lunch. And then it gets done. And so if you're not that kind of person, if you're not that direct like I am, these scripts will be very, very helpful. So go to desiringpeace.com/scripts to get your copy of this conversation guide, to get some tips and pointers on how to deal with these conversations that come up and you don't want to feel like you're being rude by just saying no, like I do. I don't really care if my in-laws think I'm rude, or really anyone else for that matter. If I just say no, I'm not being mean. They might take it that way, but no, thank you. And then see what happens. If that's not you, that's where this conversation guide will be very helpful. I'm sorry, I went on a really long time about this guide and kind of went on a few rabbit trails. I'm just kind of a rabbit trail kind of person lately. Not sure why. But anyway, if you also don't want to feel alone, if you want to join hands, link arms with other women who are in this same situation, who also feel like they have been tasked with being the peacekeeper of the family, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to come join my community at toxicinlaws.com. It is a free group for you to come and just meet and connect with other women who are going through very, very, very similar things. I think we're just over 50 members now, so chances are there's somebody in that group who has experienced something eerily similar to what you are going through. There is a paid upgrade if you are interested in paid trainings, more advanced, deeper dives into topics like boundaries and self-care and online privacy and legal protection. Because unfortunately, my husband and I and our girls, our whole family actually, has had a lot of experience seeking out legal protection. But that is in the paid member upgrade. If you're interested, you don't have to do that. You can just come and be part of the community for free, but you have to go to toxicinlaws.com to join. But I hope this series this month has been helpful and validating and made you realize that you are not the only person thinking these things. You're not the only person wondering why you can't forgive. You're not the only person who feels like you're going crazy with having toxic in-laws. And you're not the only person who feels like the responsibility of keeping the peace is on your shoulders. You're not the only one. And it's not your responsibility to carry that. So I hope you have an amazing week. God bless you. Go in peace. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.